All right, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of our brand new podcast, TV6 Investigates Between the Lines. I'm Shannon. I'm the digital executive producer here at the station, and among several of my duties, one of my roles is assisting reporters in developing their investigative series or stories. So on my end, it's a lot of the research, the behind the scenes, kind of starting to look into things, and then they take it from there. Today I have Griffin Weinberg joining me. We are going to be discussing his most recent 2-part series looking into the Essential Air Service program through the federal government for rural airports. So Griffin, without further ado, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. And for people who maybe didn't watch the series yet, or maybe only caught one part of it, can you give us a really brief kind of recap on what exactly EAS is and what you were trying to find out?
Yeah, so EAS is Essential Air Service. Basically, rural airports across the United States, they can become eligible for this Essential Air Service program. And that means that the federal government will fund up to 2 flights per day. Mm-hmm. So all 6 of the commercial airports in the Upper Peninsula, they're all rural. However, only 5 of the airports are receiving that federal funding. Marquette Sawyer Regional Airport, the only one not receiving that federal funding. So that's basically what the background of that is. You know, there's a lot of other little things that can go into that, but essentially Marquette is on their own in terms of getting the airlines. So right now they have 2 commercial airlines, American and Delta. They have United coming right now, slated to start June 1st. Marquette's on their own in terms of trying to get those airlines and to coordinate the flights and to make sure that those airlines are making a profit out of Marquette. Mm-hmm. While the other 5 airports, they have 1 commercial airline, and they're funded by the federal government, those 2 flights per day that are coming out of each of those other airports. So I likened it in the story as Marquette is basically working in a commission sales job, and the cap is the limit. It's a little riskier to work in that environment, but they can make as much money as they can make, and they have the freedom to do what they want, while the other 5 airports in the UP, they're tied to the government and how much money is allocated from this Essential Air Service program. And they don't have as much freedom, but they do have the security blanket of knowing that they're going to have those flights each and every day, so long as the federal government is going to fund this Essential Air Service program.
And it's so interesting to think about airports. I think we almost take them for granted, right? We see them as just a service that is available. But then we have this interesting division here in the UP of one that's operating under kind of a traditional capitalist format, and then our other one that really is an essential service that is provided and people can expect, for the most part, to continue. So for some viewers, they may not know that when it comes to investigative stories, they probably think of the more traditional, like we're looking into crimes or to like systemic failures. But sometimes it's also looking at more of a consumer-based investigation. So this one is one I would consider to be a consumer investigates. So can you explain a little bit about what that really means in terms of what you're looking to answer and what you're trying to figure out for viewers?
Yeah, this is hopefully the story was meant to be helpful information to everybody who watched it. In part 1 and part 2, they're up on our website, uppermichigansource.com. You can watch those now. So what I wanted to find out was, what does all of this mean for the people flying out of the airport? So one big thing is money, obviously, the cost of the flights. And there can be some variation depending on where you're flying, how long the flight's going to be. What I did in the story, I looked up flights from all 6 UP airports going to Orlando, Florida, leaving Thursday, May 7th, returning May 10th on a Sunday, and I checked those flights on April 14th. The cheapest ticket there was Houghton. It was $339 to fly from Houghton round trip. And that was, I think the time of the flight was sometime leaving in the afternoon and getting into Florida on that Thursday or Friday morning at like 12:30 in the morning.
So to pause you, because I don't remember if we covered this in the actual story for air. Obviously we have time constraints.
Yeah.
What about why Orlando? I know we discussed like which one to pick. So what was the thought process behind choosing Orlando as like Just going to check out this price.
Yeah,
These 3 airports.
just because Orlando, just to me at least, it's a vacation destination. It's a place to get away, you know, out of the Midwest. So I didn't just want to look up flights going to Chicago because, or Detroit or Minneapolis.
One of the hubs.
All the airports in the UP, they have to connect to hubs, and it's one of those 3 hubs: Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis. So I wanted it to be a connecting flight, something that's a little more distant, and something that gets you away from the feel of the UP.
And we know plenty of Upers go to Florida. Lots of snowbirds.
Yeah, and Orlando's a good place. I've been to Orlando a few times. Nice. You got Universal Studios there. Maybe you want to take a trip. I did not account for the Universal ticket or Disney World tickets in this. That would probably make it a little more expensive. But the ticket prices, they just vary, you know, and depending on when you look up ticket prices, they're always going to vary. You know, how far ahead you're looking to buy that ticket. Now, there is the opportunity at Marquette to have, in the future, more affordable, depending on how you use the word affordable, but cheaper ticket prices because Marquette has multiple airlines. They're about to have 3 airlines coming in. Mention United starting hopefully June 1st is what Marquette is saying. So the hope with that at Marquette is that those airlines are going to compete with each other in terms of wanting to get those passengers to fly on their airlines. So American and United would both fly to Chicago. Sure. They're going to try and compete against each other. That's the thought process behind the people at Marquette, trying to get the passengers. So they're going to try and compete with maybe putting up better flight times, lower ticket prices. Whereas at one of the other 5 airports in the UP that are funded by this Essential Air Service program, they don't really have the freedom to choose.
Sure.
It's at the behest of the government and at the behest of these airlines. So talk to Houghton Memorial, and this is the other part where hopefully this would be helpful information for the consumer about what times you fly in and out of the airport, what time that you can arrive back into the Upper Peninsula. At Houghton, they use SkyWest, which is a division of United. SkyWest, it's a regional airline, so they can be operated by United, by Delta. There's a few different airports that use SkyWest in the Upper Peninsula. At Houghton, you would buy those tickets through United if you were to go to the Houghton County Memorial website. They don't really have the freedom to decide when the flights are coming in because it's a federally government program. United basically flies into Houghton. There's going to be a flight in the morning and in the evening because that's just the most convenient thing for that airline.
And to ensure they're like getting full capacity of those planes, right?
Yes. Yeah. Whereas in Marquette, they don't have as much negotiating power as you might think. They have a little bit. Marquette, they can go to the table. They can request something. In Delta or American, they'll listen. But at the end of the day, anyway, those airlines, they're going to choose what's best for their metrics and what makes sense for the most part from them.
Yeah, but then in Marquette's situation, it would be more like a business transaction.
Yes.
Of kind of like, I guess, somebody carrying a service and going to the provider and saying, we would like to carry this from you as well.
Yeah, and that's what happened. The Marquette airport manager, David Earhart, he talked about going to Delta earlier or at the end of last year and saying, hey, some of the people who are in the business class flying out of Marquette to Minneapolis, they talked about wanting to have an earlier flight that would connect to the Minneapolis hub from Delta. And at the end of the day, Delta said, this is what's best for our metrics. However, the best thing for their metrics was that early morning flight. So I'm hoping that appeased the business class flying out of Delta, but there is a little more negotiating power from Marquette's side. But at the end of the day, wherever you're flying out of the UP, the times are pretty much dictated by the airliners themselves and not the airport managers.
So don't yell at your airport managers.
No.
Because they have limited power there.
They're trying their best.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you bring up business class flyers. We just did a 1-part, it was a very quick turn, investigates, Colin Jackson was on it for population trends in the UP, and he found that we had kind of a boost in migrations to the UP because of remote work availability after the pandemic. And you got to wonder how many of those people are now traveling for business or for work. And you did find a direct link, right, between the availability of air service and like an area's economic sustainability and growth, right?
Yeah, they're talking to the CEO of Lake Superior Community Partnership, Christopher Germain. He talked about doing studies how local businesses are affected by their proximity to an airport. So if there's an airport close to a local business, that could have a 10% effect, positive or negative, on the valuation of that business. So I'm sure that we'll get into this a little bit, but the future of the EAS program, it's always in flux. Every year, the president makes a budget proposal, and then there's an actual fiscal year budget that gets put into place. It seems over the last few years there's been, in the proposal, some proposed cuts to the EAS program that could affect some airports, but over the last couple of years, the actual budget that's been put in place for EAS has been much larger and higher than what the proposed number was. But if there were to be a cut to essential air service, and if that would affect the future of airports in the Upper Peninsula, that could hurt the valuation of maybe some businesses in those areas. So for example, up in Houghton, if there is a significant cut to EAS, and right now President Trump in his fiscal year 2027 proposal, he's proposing to cut the budget for EAS from $513 million to $141 million. So pretty big hefty cut. Don't know exactly what the effect of that would be or what that would mean for the future of those airports, but if there happens to be a cut and the airport in Houghton for some reason went down and can't operate anymore because the federal government can't afford to keep giving them money, that could have a 10% negative effect on valuations for businesses around the Houghton area. Same goes for the other airports, which would be in the Sioux, in Ironwood, the Ford Airport in Iron Mountain, and then in Delta County as well. So that is something to just keep an eye on, but businesses, they do thrive when there is passengers flying into those certain areas. And you know, tourism is huge up here in the Upper Peninsula. We talk about it every winter and every summer, and how businesses, they plan for that tourism, whether it is the summer or the winter. I don't know what the answer is if an airport, you know, were to go out of one of those areas in the other 5 locations. Yeah,
well, and you know, the soundbite that sticks out to me is it was at the very end of your second package, and it was there's going to be winners and losers.
Yeah.
And I mean, that can probably be said for any, you know, commercial venture. But I think that's exactly right from what you've laid out, is that there's going to be that push and pull of those areas who stand a chance of losing their EAS suffering economically in some ways, but then another UP airport potentially benefiting, and even consumer prices in that area benefiting because of competition. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when that budget is actually proposed and how those are allocated in the future. And it was a very telling quote. She's talking about Dwayne DeRay, current Marquette County Administrator, the former Marquette airport manager from 2012 to 2015. He said it, David Earhart, the airport manager at Marquette, said it, that Marquette would be the beneficiary if there are cuts to essential air service, because Marquette doesn't have that tie to the federal government. They're working on their own. It's risky that way, but there could be a lot of positives. And just with the way that those budget proposals have been trending, and again, the finalized budgets were a lot higher than the proposals, but the fiscal year 2027 budget proposal would drop EAS from $513 million to $141 million. If that number is even close to that big of a cut in the finalized budget for fiscal year 2027, Marquette would be a very big benefactor in having potentially the only airport in the Upper Peninsula. So if things were to go that way.
If things were to fall that way. But right now we don't know. And predicting when the budget's going to get passed these days, very difficult to guess, but the fiscal year starts October 1st of this year. Hopefully there will be an answer by that time.
So we'll have to follow up and see. But, you know, I think in the short term, what is interesting about investigative stories like this is that we're always kind of adapting to new questions that come up. Right? There's so much that we don't know. Yet, why was now the right time, do you think, to look into the essential air service in the area?
Well, for Marquette specifically, there's a lot of talk about the FBO, fixed-based operations. So there's a lot of conversation about that right now. And there is a little bit of an update to that at Marquette for anybody who's been following the story. There's a couple of lawsuits against Marquette County, who is looking to overtake the fixed-based operations at the Marquette Airport. One of those lawsuits dropped. There's still another lawsuit that is following through. So it's a little relevant, I guess, in that regard. But it's also something I know that you were interested in, and we buried the lead a little bit. But Shannon did lots and lots of research, and basically you went to Dick's Sporting Goods and you bought a tee and a bucket of balls and a bat, and you took some swings, and you said, "Here's how you do it, Griff. Now you go ahead and take some swings."
Kind of.
So
so
let me flip it on you. What made you want to really look into this right now?
I think my interest is always in research, and so when somebody puts an interesting question on my lap, and I think that's why I enjoy working with all of our reporters so much, is it's like this collaboration of uncovering an answer for people. And I know right now, I'm from Oregon, and so I have to fly home all the time, and I'm constantly checking ticket prices. And I have a lot of people who are constantly asking me, like, well, how do ticket prices from somewhere so remote compare to other areas? And those had been questions just as another person who is a consumer in the UP who is traveling and doing everything that everyone else is, I had wondered about. And I think that's where a lot of these story ideas come from, is things that we notice in our day-to-day lives that spark questions. And so I'd had that in the back of my mind, and then a viewer had sent us an Investigates tip, kind of after Jerry Tudor's reporting on the FBO operations. They'd said, hey, did you know that Marquette's the only one that doesn't receive federal subsidies? So that's where it started, and then it was a lot of combing through government documents.
A lot of them.
A lot of government documents.
A lot of big numbers and big words.
Yes, because the U.S. Department of Transportation keeps records back to 1986, which you mentioned in your story, of all of the airports across the country that are not only classified as rural, but that are also EAS eligible. And so I combed through every document from 1986. Thank goodness for the Control F function, being able to search through some of those for like Marquette and the UP airports.
Thank goodness for you for willing to do that too.
I love it.
Saving me some time.
I love it. Weirdly excited about looking into that kind of stuff. So it was just a lot of combing through documents, putting numbers together, looking at budgets from previous years for this program, reaching out to government officials and asking, a lot of these stories, like, we are not experts when we start, we're novices. And so we're learning as we're putting these stories together, as you very well know. So it was a lot of me reaching out to the U.S. Department of Transportation and saying, hey, how does this actually function? And what's the difference between a rural airport and somebody who's EAS eligible? What was fun was then putting all of that together in a neat little package, putting it on Griffin's lap, and saying, hey, I've got all this information for you, but now, what's fun is to see reporters like Griffin take it into the field and really start their own process of discovery, as I like to call it, because it's continuing to kind of unwrap something. So how did you go from taking this mountain of stuff I put on your plate and then kind of finding out, okay, what's the human element of this?
Just
story?
through the conversation. So Shannon set up the interviews too, so thank you for that.
Sure.
But the first interview, did 2 interviews on one day. The first was with Christopher Germain, Lake Superior Partnership CEO. And the second one was about an hour later with Dwayne DeRay. Just after having the conversations with the both of them, right there in my mind, I figured that this wasn't Marquette Airport versus the other 5 airports in the UP. And maybe a lot of people think that way, but that's not what any of the airport managers that we talked to. David Earhart with Marquette, Dwayne DeRay, Christopher Germain, and then Casey Polkinghorn over at Houghton County Memorial. There's no us versus them or anything like that. In fact, a lot of the airports, they work together on a semi-regular basis, especially after COVID. Dwayne DeRay said that there was a lot of conversations with the other airport managers about just how to get through that time. Christopher Germain, he's on a Dickinson County board where he talks with the Ford airport manager very often about what's going on with them. So there's no fighting between any of the airports. This, again, was just wanting to be consumer based, and that's what I learned after talking with both Christopher Germain and Dwayne DeRay, was that people just want to know why flights are at certain times, why tickets cost, however much they do. And there's a lot of information that goes into that. And a lot of that information is in part 1 and part 2 of this TV6 Investigate story that you can watch at uppermichigansource.com.
Right. And so I think to kind of wrap us up then, with any of these stories, there are some remaining questions. Obviously, the big one is what's going to happen with the budget in October.
It's the big one.
But a couple of others have even come from viewers who have been watching. One is how does the fixed base operations development play into ticket prices in terms of are fuel prices for the airlines going to change because the county is sourcing it versus the FBO that was handling it before? Are there any other questions that are just like still kind of moving around in your head that you're looking forward to answering in the future?
Well, I think with the FBO at Marquette County, I don't know if there's going to be a hard answer on that until the lawsuit with Kubik Aviation is actually figured and until Marquette is 100% certain that they're going to overtake the fixed-based operations. And when Jerry talked to David Earhart and Joe DeRocha, Marquette County Board Chair, the other night, they seem very confident that Marquette County will overtake the FBO, that they have all the staffing in place, they have all the trucks in place, all the employees trained as far as they want to go to. I don't know right now what that would do to ticket prices at Marquette, and I don't think we'll know that until that is a certain fact that Marquette County will overtake FBO. But right now, Marquette County seems pretty confident that competition between Delta, American, and United will lower ticket prices and make it hopefully an easier travel experience for anybody flying out of Marquette. That's one big question that I have, and then the only other big question I have really is the future of EAS, because President Trump and the administration, they're trying to cut as much out of that EAS funding as they can. Will that actually come into fruition for fiscal year 2027? I don't know, but if the budget gets cut from $513 million to $141 million, what's the effect going to have on those other 5 airports across the Upper Peninsula? Would all of them have to close? Would some of them have to close? Would they not have to close at all? These are all just speculative, but that is the big question that I have, and I think that's the thing that matters most, and especially to people that live in different parts of the UP away from Marquette, where if you live up in the Keweenaw, how is that going to affect them if the Houghton Airport closes down and they have to drive to Marquette, in order to, if that's the nearest airport that they have. And same thing over on the eastern side of the UP. So it's little questions like that that hopefully will be answered closer to October or sometime at the end of this year.
And I think in general, in the future, it'll be interesting to see how, so many of these things that we look into overlap in some way. I think population growth and decline is going to directly intersect with how the accessibility of transportation up here changes and evolves, and I think that's going to directly impact our economic opportunity and growth. And so I think those are always going to be in flux, and probably always going to have something to look into.
Maybe there might be something to look into with getting us some more Lyft and Uber drivers up here. That'd be something. We've seen a Waymo driving around. Not to change subjects, but I don't know where that's going to play into things. I'd be curious about that.
I am curious about that as well. I've got friends that visit from out of state, and they ask if there's Uber and Lyft. I'm like, no.
No, we got Mark Tran.
There's Mark Tran and there's a taxi service. So there's something. But other than, that's all I have for you today, Griffin. Thank you so much again for joining me. Is there anything else you'd like to leave viewers with?
No, just Shannon does a lot of the work. So, she's behind the scenes. She's not in front of the camera, not getting all the credit. But, the story doesn't get done without you. So, thank you.
Appreciate that a lot. It's a lot of keyboard clicking and staring at monitors. But it's fun for me, so I like doing it. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us on episode 2 of TV6 Investigates Between the Lines. We will catch you next time.